received a call from a couple who recently purchased a new home, and strange events were occurring in the barn. The original home was built in the 1840s. The barn was added a few years later. The original house burned down in 1976, and a new one was built on the old foundation in 1981. Upon arriving, I noticed the property was impeccably kept. It was in a rural area and far from the road, but they still added a paved driveway. This was unusual for the area and indicated they were most likely not from around here. I was greeted at the door and invited in by a young couple in their mid-20s. The home was as well kept on the inside as it was on the outside. We chatted for a few moments, then they insisted that I see the barn. I got absolutely no feelings from inside of the house, so I followed them towards the back door. But there was a kiddie fence blocking the kitchen to prevent 4 miniature goats from escaping. This was a shock since I had judged them to be entirely different types of people. They said they had no choice but to keep the goats there because whatever was in the barn tried to kill them. They had lost 2 goats already, and the vet said that they were likely frightened to death. Approaching the barn, you could see that they had been in the process of fixing it up. A new fence was surrounding the front to create a small yard that was recently raked. The barn was an old tobacco-style barn that had been repurposed and painted. As we entered, the hair on our arms immediately stood up. I definitely sensed something there. I asked if there was a specific area where there seemed to be more activity and was shown the milk room. The man said that everything started when he built the milking stall. I asked for some time to poke around solo, and they practically ran away. I walked around the milking room for about an hour, and that was a long time for such a small room. On the opposite side of the barn was a slightly larger room with a concrete floor, new walls. It had electricity, a sink, and some cheese-making equipment. But that room felt sterile and uncomfortable, like an operating room. Nothing was lurking there. It wasn't until I got to the stables that I finally felt something. That part of the barn only had a dirt floor, and although it was raked clean, it didn't feel that way. I'm not a psychic, but I have learned to pay attention to my body and my impressions. All I wanted to do in that moment was rake it clean myself. Confused, I summoned the owner and asked if he had found anything in that area. He seemed slightly embarrassed as he explained that there had been a deep trench along the wall. Stacked at one end was something that resembled a pile of folded old leather. He asked me not to tell his wife, but he only covered it instead of removing it. He said it was too dirty to touch. I asked for a shovel. 5 minutes later, I had located the leather. Just like the man said, it was dried hard and much too dirty to touch. As I fought to unwrap it, I was struck with worry that it might make me sick. I felt nauseous as I handled it, but I finally got it to unfold, and I found a very old memo book inside. The writing was still perfectly legible. It was a journal written by a Civil War soldier. As I scanned through it, I found the last page with writing about halfway through. It had blood on it, and the writer was leaving a message to his parents. He was sorry that he couldn't make it home. He had been shot, but his last wish was that he be returned home to Savannah so he could be buried by the stream. At the end, he signed the name Jonas. I refilled the hole and took the journal and the leather to the front of the house. I showed the couple the journal, suggested that we hold a small memorial service in the barn. They invited the only neighbors they knew, and we held the service by the place where the journal had been buried. The couple agreed to let me take the journal to the Savannah Historical Society, where I asked them to keep it on display, and they agreed. 3 weeks later, when I checked in with the couple, the goats were back in the barn, and there were no further issues. I investigate the paranormal, and I was contacted by a lady who swore her cat was possessed. I was incredibly skeptical but very curious. Apparently, the cat would suddenly start screaming and do this crazy slow-motion walk while tilting its head at weird angles. If she tried to approach it while this was happening, it would try to scratch her. After having one of these spells, it would hide but not relax. Its tail would swing wildly. It would growl for up to an hour. As strange as this sounded, I spoke to a colleague who's very sensitive to the paranormal, and she insisted we had to investigate. We got to the residence at 4:30 p.m., took a tour of the house before meeting the cat. It was a standard 3-bedroom, 2-bath, ranch-style home, and we found nothing creepy about it. The cat was cool, very affectionate, and really took to my colleague. They spent a couple of hours alone together while I took care of some paperwork and formalities with the lady. She invited us to investigate the home that night while she was out. She had a date and would work the night shift at the hospital right after. She left for her date at 7:30. We began our formal investigation. We moved from room to room, asking questions in hopes of catching an EVP or a knock in response, but there was no activity until 11:30, when the cat started screaming in the master bedroom. Upon entering the room, my partner stopped me and motioned for me to stay quiet, but it was hard with all the screaming. It made my hair stand on end. As we listened, a shadow began to form in the corner of the room, and there was a whisper coming from there. Our DVRs didn't pick it up, and we couldn't understand what it said, but the cat was irate. It was scared and ready to fight. Everything was exactly as the lady described. My partner very calmly told the shadow that it was scaring the cat, but she didn't think it was on purpose. Then, she promised that we would help it if it went into the next bedroom. We entered the smaller bedroom and sat on the bed quietly, waiting to see what happened. A few moments later, my partner grabbed me, pointed at the connected bathroom door. I clearly saw a featureless humanoid shape, but it was blacker than the surrounding darkness. My teammate and I worked together many times, and we had a routine for situations like this. I told the entity that everything was okay, that the cat was calm, and we wanted to help. It slowly moved through the doorway and slightly into the room. That's when we heard the word kitty through the DVR. I always use an earpiece when recording so I can hear what's being said in real time. I asked if it was trying to pet the kitty, and it stretched its arm towards the master bedroom. I asked if it wanted to hurt the kitty, and there was an almost immediate sigh or whimper. I repeated the question and stated that I needed an answer before we could help. A minute later, my partner sensed that it only wanted to pet the cat. She also sensed that this was the spirit of an adolescent male who may have had a developmental issue in life. While we spoke, the entity seemed to slightly sway back and forth, but he didn't go anywhere. He seemed like he was listening to our conversation. I explained that he had scared the cat, and if he wanted to pet it, he would have to make friends with it first. I suggested that he try just sitting still and speaking to the cat so it could learn that he didn't want to hurt it. Then the cat would eventually come to him. A moment later, the cat appeared in the hall doorway and calmly sat down. No one spoke or moved, including the spirit. Soon, the cat joined us on the bed. My partner and I began to pet it. As I looked from the cat back to the spirit, I noticed that it was gone, and we didn't experience anything else that night. 2 days later, my teammate called me, very excited. She'd researched the property and found that a young man with Down syndrome died when he fell out of a treehouse. We met the lady the following day, and I played her the recording of us talking to the spirit. When she heard me telling the spirit how to be friends with the cat, she began to cry. That morning, the cat was on the bed in the smaller bedroom, purring loudly, moving its head like someone was scratching it.